Welcome to Biota.org interviews. This evening I'm joined by Dr. Richard Gordon, a theoretical biologist at the University of Manitoba, Canada. Dr. Gordon, for those not familiar with your work, could you give some background on your academic work and your interest in A-life?
Okay. I guess I work in a couple of areas. First of all, my major appointment is in radiology at the University of Manitoba. And the primary thing I do in that, with that hat on, is trying to detect breast cancer at very early stages. Most of that work consists of developing new computed tomography algorithms, some positron emission tomography algorithms, and a little bit of work in magnetic resonance imaging. The other major thing I work on is how embryos build themselves. And I deal mostly with a salamander called the axolotl. It's a native of Mexico, and it's got the name Ambystoma mexicanum. And there we're working at the earliest stages, basically from the fertilized egg through the formation of the tube that becomes the brain and spinal cord. I also work in two other areas. One is sort of a hobby, and that is diatoms, which are single-celled algae with a very ornate silica shell. And those I work on trying to figure out how, again, they make the patterns in these shells and also how they move, which gets me into sort of microfluidics and mechanisms of motility. And this has branched out into an interest in diatom nanotechnology, which is a new field of nanotechnology where you try to grow your nanotechnology parts instead of using lithography techniques. Finally, completely different from all of these, I got involved in questions of how to stop the AIDS epidemic, and I work with mathematicians and epidemiologists and physicians on modeling the AIDS epidemic, and in particular, we've got a big project to try to stop the epidemic in Afghanistan, where they actually have very few cases right now, but we're trying to keep it that way. Okay?
Terrific. I noticed on your website you discuss the origin of perception, the study of the origin of perception. An interesting branch of artificial life is AI in a simulated environment. I'm interested what fundamentals of perception you would start from if you were going to simulate it in an AI environment.
Well, the most interesting place to look would be chemotaxis of plain old Escherichia coli, the common bacterium that's used in molecular biology. The chemotaxis mechanism has been worked out in pretty good detail. There's some mathematical models, and we can start to look at the evolution of it. So it's basically it's smell, because chemotaxis, the organism is swimming away from or towards diffusing molecules in its environment. And one can start to ask questions: how could this chemotactic ability have developed from an organism which didn't have it, and do this at a bacterial level with an organism whose DNA has been completely sequenced? So, I don't know, I think we can possibly get a handle on perception in bacteria, which is not terribly sophisticated compared to our vision, for example, but you got to start someplace.
Certainly. And in terms of simulating that, how would you talk to an A-life developer in terms of creating a simulation that represented that?
Well, what got me into the A-life questions here is an article that was published a while ago in which it was claimed that you had to have a designer for A-life, and it struck me that this was basically the same argument from design that's used by the intelligent design people. And we've got a bootstrap problem here, because the organism, in some sense, designs itself. Now, of course, the environment has an impact on this, but there's a sense in which perception, the origin of perception, has got to be figured out just as much as the origin of life does, and perhaps it's one and the same problem. Because if you think about it, an early organism, no matter how early, has got to eat in some fashion, which means it has to recognize some feature of the environment which it can take in as nutrition, and possibly reject other things. And as life got started, as soon as there are two kinds of life, you probably had predator and prey relations. So you rapidly get into a situation where the organism has to not just recognize food, but recognize what to avoid. And then at some point sex evolved, so it also has to be able to recognize a mate. So these very fundamental things, eat, avoid being eaten, and find a mate, are possibly the origins of perception, and the origins of these have to be figured out along with the origin of life. And we've got a real bootstrap problem in all of this. Nobody has succeeded in any of these problems at this point.
Certainly. I find it curious, maintaining the Biota.org site, that people on both sides of the American science versus religion debate, on one side, as you've noted, intelligent design folk, seem to find a home on Biota.org. What has your contact been with regards to people who have a background in intelligent design, and how do they relate to your work?
Well, I do have an article which is will be in press very shortly, which I call, well, let's see, I should get the exact title, but it's about, the title is something like Overconfident Anti-Creationists versus Overconfident Creationists. And the problem I identify is that if you look at most of the anti-creationist literature by scientists, it tends to be rather dogmatic and state conclusions that we really are not that certain of, as if certainty in science is the answer to the uncertainty that the intelligent design people like to raise. And I find that this is actually counterproductive, because one of the major features of science is humility and understanding what we think we understand and understanding what we haven't really grasped yet. And so presenting certainty in the face of these challenges from intelligent design people, who basically to me want to throw their hands up and say we can't explain this or can't explain that, is not a fruitful approach as far as I'm concerned.
Very interesting. You touched briefly on your humanitarian work in Afghanistan, and certainly looking through your website, you've also sent books back to Afghanistan. The contemporary intelligent design debate, for want of a better term, is very much centered on kind of Christian philosophies and views. Is there a comparable Islamic intelligent design?
Yes. The publishing engine for Islamic intelligent design is in Turkey, and there are also some Muslims who argue against this approach, and that basically they use the same proof text as Christians do, just taking away the Christian parts of it. You'll find, if you look at Jewish creationists, they also come up with almost identical arguments to Christian creationists, and in fact, they're starting to get together. There's already been one conference where Jewish and Christian creationists got together. We haven't had a full one where all three religions have got together, but it may happen soon. So it's a curious thing. But basically, they all use the same types of arguments.
Fascinating. Very fascinating. With regards to the broader A-Life community, I know you've been involved with Biota for a number of years now. What is your sense of the contemporary A-Life community, and what more would you like to see in it?
Well, I'd like to see more physics, I guess, because I think if you look at, say, Tom Ray's simulations, they are severely limited by his organisms being confined to a very restricted physics inside a computer. And I example, is to build robots which interact with the world and therefore interact with real physics. And so novelty could possibly be generated by the robots starting to respond to different aspects of physics than that which we originally programmed them to do. I think a lot of the richness of A life that's lacking is because it's all simulated, and the physical environment in which the simulated organisms exist, that simulated physics is not very rich. And so those organisms have little opportunity to respond to aspects of physics that we didn't program in.
Fascinating. In terms of current A-Life developers looking at your work, where do you think they should start if they're looking to build on work that they've already done or start new simulation environments based on your work?
Well, I don't get, except for this amateur playing around with the question of the origin of perception, I don't get into behavior very much. What I concentrate on is how an organism builds itself, and I'm starting to apply concepts that are sort of like perception, but I'm not sure philosophically where they belong. What I see in an organism is an interaction between physical phenomena, let's say in an embryo, that occur at the scale of the embryo, and these physical phenomena having a direct link to phenomena occurring at the molecular level. And these links gives the organism ability to combine physics at two very different scales and coordinate those physics. The physics at a large scale might involve waves that go over an embryo. It might involve simple phenomena like surface tension, which then might influence at the molecular level things like gene expression. And I'm coming to the conclusion that the way an embryo builds itself is in an interaction between the physics at these different levels. Now you get into a philosophical conundrum because there is a presumption that we can explain the physics at the higher level based on the lower level, and so in that sense, many people just ignore the higher level physics. And I'm not sure that's correct. There are people like Stephen Gould argued for higher level science in terms of the behaviors of populations of organisms during evolution. There's always been a loose notion around that physics at different levels has some independence from the physics at lower levels. And if you look at chaos theory, a lot of the stuff that comes out of there, it shows a certain independence of phenomena from what's going on at the lower levels. So I don't think we've sorted this stuff out yet, but the interaction between multiple levels, I think, is important to investigate, understand, simulate, and see if we can come to some sort of understanding as to what we're dealing with.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Dr. Gordon, for the opportunity to talk with you. Do you have any final comments for the Biota interview?
Well, one of the things which, one part of artificial life has been the notion of growing computers. And I partly got into the artificial life literature by mildly rebuking the people who have been trying to grow computers for not using realistic models of how organisms grow. I think if we understand better how an organism builds itself, we might then be able to better understand how to build a computer that builds itself. And a computer that builds itself is, I think, an important part of artificial life.
Certainly. Thank you very much for the opportunity to interview you, and I hope many people who listen to this interview are sparked by your comments and get in contact where need be to get additional information. Thank you once again.
Thanks a lot.